Imagine this. You are 7 years old. You walk into a room you've never been allowed to enter before. Dark mahogany walls, a long oak table that seems to stretch forever. Portraits of people you've never met staring down at you with serious, unsmiling eyes. Your grandfather sits at the head of the table. He doesn't greet you the way he normally does. No warm hug, no candy slipped into your palm. He simply looks at you, points to the chair beside him, and says, "It's time you started learning. You don't know what you're about to learn. You're 7. You'd rather be outside." The afternoon sun is still bright through the tall windows, and somewhere down the hall you can hear your cousins laughing, but you sit down. In that moment, that quiet, unremarkable Tuesday afternoon turns out to be the moment that separates your family from every other family you will ever meet. This is what gets taught in that room, and why it matters for your family right now. Age 7, we don't own anything personally. The first thing your grandfather says about money makes no sense to you at all. Our family doesn't own anything. You look around. The house, the cars in the driveway, the land stretching beyond the window as far as you can see. The paintings on the wall that your mother always told you not to touch. "But we live here," you say carefully. He smiles. "First time all morning. We live here. But we don't own it. The trust owns it. You don't know what a trust is. It sounds like something between friends. I trust you, you trust me. That kind of thing." So he explains it the way you explain things to a 7-year-old. "Imagine you have a magical box," he says, leaning forward. "You put everything valuable inside it. The box is protected by very strong rules. Nobody can break it open. Not the government. Not a stranger with a lawsuit. Not even your own children if they make a terrible decision someday. So the box keeps everything safe? The box keeps everything growing," he corrects gently. "Safe and growing. For you. For your children. For their children's children, children's children." What your grandfather is describing, though you won't learn the official name until years later, is a dynasty trust. Every significant asset your family owns sits inside this legal structure. Real estate, business interests, investment portfolios. All of it protected, all of it compounding, none of it exposed to the estate taxes that silently destroy most family fortunes every single generation. Here's why this matters more than most people realize. When a typical family passes wealth from parent to child, the government takes a cut. Then the child takes their share. Then when that child dies and passes it to their children, the government takes another cut. Then another share disappears. Generation after generation, even if every single person manages the money perfectly, the wealth slowly drains away like water through a cracked bucket. That's exactly what happened to the Vanderbilt family. In 1877, they were worth $300 million, over $10 billion in today's dollars. Railroads, mansions, entire city blocks of Manhattan. By 1973, not a single Vanderbilt descendant was a millionaire. 3 generations, $10 billion. Gone? Not because they were reckless. Not because they made catastrophic investments. But because they handed money from person to person, paying taxes every single time, diluting the fortune with every transfer. Your family does it differently. Everything goes into the trust. Taxes are paid once, and then the assets stay inside, growing and compounding generation after generation, never carved up, never diluted. Your grandfather taps the table. The Vanderbilt has handed out buckets. He says, "We built a river. Age 12, the company owns it. Not us." 5 years later, you're back in that room. Older now. A little less fidgety. This time your father is there too, sitting across from a man in a gray suit who keeps spreading documents across the table. You're trying to follow the conversation. They're talking about a new building the family is acquiring. A commercial property downtown. "Who's buying it?" you ask during a pause. Your father and the man in the gray suit both look at you, then at each other. Your father nods slowly. "Good question. Tell him." The man in the gray suit turns to you. "The holding company is buying it. Not your father. Not you. The company. What's the difference?" He sets down his pen. "Let me show you something." He draws a simple diagram on a blank piece of paper. At the top, a box labeled Family Holding Company. Lines extending downward to boxes labeled real estate, business interests, investments, other assets. Below all of that, at the very bottom, your family's names. Your family sits here, he says, pointing to the bottom. The company sits here, pointing to the top. The company owns everything. Your family owns the company. But there's a layer of protection between you and everything you've built. You stare at the diagram. Why does that matter? Because if someone sues your father tomorrow, he says calmly, they can sue him personally. But the building downtown? The investments, those belong to the company. A lawsuit against your father personally cannot simply reach through and take company assets. You sit with that for a moment. And when it's time to pass things down to the next generation, you transfer shares of the company, he says, not the assets themselves. Transferring shares is far more tax efficient, far more controlled, far less exposed. This is what the Walton family figured out before Walmart became the largest retailer in the world. Jim, Alice, and Rob Walton, the three most recognizable heirs, personally own less than 1% of Walmart stock. The controlling 19% takes its inside Walton Enterprises, a private holding company structured to maintain family control across generation. Equal ownership feels fair. But ownership structure is what actually protects wealth. The man in the gray suit slides the diagram across the table toward you. Keep that, he says. You'll understand it better every year. He was right. Age 16, we have our own bank. At 16, you think you understand money. You have a part-time job. You have a savings account. You understand the basic idea: earn more than you spend. Then your grandmother sits you down one afternoon and dismantles everything you thought you knew. We have our own bank, she says simply. You laugh a little. We're not a bank. No, she agrees. But we function like one. Let me show you. She explains that the family trust, the magical box your grandfather described when you were 7, also functions as a financial institution for the family. And the engine that powers it is something most people wildly underestimate. Life insurance. Not the kind people buy to replace income when someone dies. Something different. A network of whole life insurance policies, one for every family member, that over time build up something called cash value inside the trust. Every policy we hold, she explains, does two things simultaneously. It builds cash value that grows over time, and it pays dividends back into the family bank. So the bank gets bigger every year? Every year. And when any family member needs capital to invest, to start a business, to handle an emergency, they borrow from the family bank instead of going to an outside institution. You think about this. And when they pay it back, it goes back into the bank. With interest, which grows the bank further. She pauses, and when a family member passes away, the life insurance pays out into the bank. So even death, as painful as it is, makes the family financially stronger. You're quiet for a long moment. Then you think about Joe Robbie. You'd learn it about him in school, the man who built the Miami Dolphins from nothing into a franchise worth hundreds of millions. When he died, his estate owed massive taxes. The team was essentially his only major asset. You can write a check to the IRS with an NFL franchise. With no liquid cash available, his family was forced to sell the team, not at the right time, not at the right price, but immediately under pressure at a loss. One of the greatest sports franchises in American history slipped out of family hands, not because of bad decisions, but because of a simple, devastating liquidity problem. Your grandmother reads the recognition on your face. Wealth without liquidity, she says quietly, is just a very impressive cage. You can see everything you have, but you can't move. And the moment something forces your hand, you lose it. The family bank exists so your family never has to sell something it should keep forever. Age 19, these are the rules. All of them. You're home from your first year of college when your uncle calls a family meeting. Not a casual dinner. A formal meeting. That room again? Everyone present: parents, aunts, uncles, older cousin. Even the family attorney sits in the corner, a thick binder open on his knee. Your uncle slides a document across the table to each person. The family constitution, he says, updated and restated. Everyone reads it. Everyone signs it. You flipped through it. It's longer than you expected. Rules for everything. how distributions from the trust are approved, how family members can borrow from the family bank and under what conditions, what happens to a family member's share in the event of divorce, how disputes between family members are resolved without involving outside courts, what happens if someone wants to sell their stake in a family business, who has voting rights on major asset decisions and who doesn't. This feels like a lot of rules, one of your cousins mutters. Your uncle nods. It is. And here's why they exist. He tells you a story. Two brothers who inherited a $5 million business with no written rules. One wanted to reinvest profits. The other was going through a divorce and needed cash immediately. Both had legitimate needs, but without a framework for resolution, they ended up in court. Lawyers, creditors, for sale. A $5 million business sold under duress for $3 million. $2 million destroyed not by a bad market, but by the absence of rules. Rules written during a crisis, your uncle says, protect whoever has the most leverage in that moment. Rules written before a crisis protect the family. He looks around the table. We write rules when everyone is calm, when everyone has a level head, when nobody needs anything desperately. That's the only time rules are actually fair. You sign the document. You don't fully appreciate it yet. But 3 years later, when a cousin's marriage falls apart and the divorce attorneys start circling the family's real estate holdings, you watch the family constitution do exactly what it was designed to do. The attorneys find nothing to grab. Every asset is protected, every scenario already addressed, every rule already in place. Your cousin loses a marriage. The family doesn't lose a single asset. Age 24, the board exists to protect you from yourself. Your first real disagreement with the family structure happens at 24. You've been working in finance for 2 years. You've spotted what you're convinced is a generational investment opportunity. You want the family trust to move aggressively. You want to act fast. You bring your proposal to the family council. 3 family members. To independent advisors with no family connection. 1 corporate trustee, a professional institution whose legal obligation is to manage the trust according to its governing rules. They listen carefully. They ask questions you haven't considered. They request a second analysis. They want to see the downside scenarios. You're frustrated. By the time we go through this process, the opportunity will be gone, you say. The lead independent advisor looks at you calmly. Every person who has ever lost a family fortune, he says, was absolutely convinced they were looking at a generational opportunity. Silence. The board doesn't exist to slow you down, he continues. It exists to make sure that when you're right, the family moves with confidence. And when you're wrong, the family doesn't move at all. Use a back. The proposal goes through a 30-day review. In that time, new information surfaces about the investment. Regulatory changes that your initial analysis hadn't accounted for. The opportunity was real, but the timing was wrong by about 18 months. The board waits. The family invests 18 months later at a significantly better entry point. You never argue with the board structure again. This is what the Hearst family understood, one of the most iconic dynasties in America, builders of the Hearst Castle, founders of a media empire. They installed a board structure for their family trust long before it was fashionable. Family members, independent outsiders, a professional trustee. Not because the family wasn't smart enough to manage things alone, but because no family is smart enough to manage things alone. Emotion is too powerful. Urgency is too seductive. Blind spots are too dangerous. The board isn't an imitation. It's the reason the wealth survives. Age 28, make the wrong decision hard. At 28, a friend approaches you with a business proposition. He wants to buy into one of the family's operating companies. He's well-connected, well-funded, and the offer is genuinely attractive. You bring it to your father. Your father doesn't even look at the term sheet. Does he know about the transfer restrictions? I mentioned them, you say. He thinks we can work around them. Your father sets down his coffee. We can't. And we won't. He explains again, patiently, why the family's business interests have strict rules around who can own shares and how they can be transferred. No outside party can simply purchase a stake. Any family member who wants to sell must offer the shares to the family first, a right of first refusal. And even then, the sale requires board approval and a structured process that takes months. That seems like it might scare off good partners, you say? It scares off impatient partners, he corrects. Good partners respect structure. They understand why it exists. Anyone who wants to work around the transfer restrictions is telling you exactly what kind of partner they'd be once they're inside. You think about what happens in companies without these restrictions. 3 partners, any one of whom can sell their stake on a bad day. One panic sell changes the ownership structure. A stranger with different values suddenly has a vote. Business direction shifts. The other 2 partners are now negotiating with someone who doesn't share the original vision. Or worse, creditors discover that shares can be liquidated, and suddenly the company becomes a target. Making something difficult, your father says, is not the same as making it impossible. If a family member genuinely needs liquidity, there's a process. They can borrow against their stake. They can sell to another family member. In extreme circumstances, the board can approve an outside transaction, but it won't happen on a bad day, you finish. It won't happen on a bad day, he confirms. The Mars family has operated this way since 1911. No public stock. Strict transfer rules. A structure that makes impulsive decisions nearly impossible. They are currently the largest family-owned business in the world. Staying private removes short-term pressure. And removing short-term pressure is what allows decades of uninterrupted compounding. Age 30, think in centuries, not quarters. At 30, you take over management of the family's investment portfolio. Your first instinct is to optimize, rebalance, rotate, respond to market conditions. You have screens full of data and a team of analysts, and you want to do something with all of it. Your grandfather, older now, slower, but sharper than ever, visits you in your office one afternoon. He looks at your screens, all the charts, all the positions, all the activity. He pulls up a chair. How many investments do you think you'll make in your career? He asks. You shrug. Hundreds, probably. Maybe more. He shakes his head slowly. Imagine, he says, that you had a punch card. 10 holes. Every investment decision you make punches 1 hole. When the card is full, that's it. No more decisions. Ever. 10 decisions for my entire career. 10 decisions for your entire life. You sit with that. How differently would you invest? He asks. You look at your screens differently now. All the noise, all the activity, all the rebalancing and rotating and responding, most of it, you realize, is just movement. Not progress. Movement. The greatest investments we have ever made, your grandfather says, are the ones we almost sold during a crisis and didn't. He stands up to leave. Time is not your enemy, he says at the door. Time is your most productive employee. Stop interrupting it. You restructure the portfolio that quarter. Fewer positions, longer horizons, dramatically less activity. The returns over the next decade are the best the family has seen in a generation. Age 38, every dollar has a job. At 38, you make your first serious mistake as a family steward. You have significant cash sitting in reserve accounts idle, earning almost nothing. It feels responsible, prudent, safe. Then an acquisition opportunity appears. A business that fits perfectly into the family's existing holdings. The price is right. The timing is right. Everything is right. Except the cash is tied up in a structure that takes 90 days to liquidate without penalty. You don't have 90 days. The seller has other buyers. You lose the deal. That evening you call your grandmother. She listens to the whole story without interrupting. When you finish, she says, you confused having money with having access to money? They're not the same thing. She walks you through something you should have built years earlier, a layered liquidity system. Not piles of idle cash, but multiple channels of rapid access. A business line of credit established with your primary bank available but unused, costing nothing until activated. A securities-backed line of credit borrowing capacity against the investment portfolio without liquidating a single position. The family bank, the cash value built up inside the life insurance network, available to borrow against within days. A home equity line on properties the family owns personally. Wealthy families never have just one source of liquidity, she says, because any single source can be blocked, frozen, or slow. You need multiple channels, so that no matter what the circumstance, you can always move. You build the system the following month. 6 months later, a better acquisition appears. This time you move within a week. The deal closes. It becomes one of the best investments the family has made in 20 years. Every dollar needs a job, your grandmother had said. Now you finally understand what she meant. Idle cash is not safety. Access to cash is safety. The dollars should be working, invested, compounding, producing, and when you need them, you pull from structured credit lines rather than liquidating productive assets. That's how wealth stays in motion without ever being interrupted. Age 45, teaching your own children. Your daughter is 7 years old the first time you bring her into that room. She looks at the portraits on the wall, the long table, the serious faces of people she's never met. She looks up at you. Why are we here? You pull out the chair beside you, your grandfather's chair, and point to the one next to it. It's time you started learning, you say. She sits down, fidgety, looking toward the window where the afternoon sun is still bright, and you begin. But you don't start with trusts or holding companies or liquidity structures. She's 7. You start with something simpler. She loves horses. So you help her start a small business selling handmade horse-themed bookmarks at the local market. She designs them. She prices them. She handles the money. She learns that creating something people want and delivering it well is what earns income. She wakes up early on weekends voluntarily because the business is hers. A few years later, for every book she reads, you give her a small amount of capital to invest. She researches the company. She makes the decision. She watches what happens and learns to understand why. By the time she's a teenager, she has something that cannot be taught in any classroom: an intuition for value creation and capital allocation that most adults never develop. You're not teaching her how to receive wealth. You're teaching her how to deserve it. And slowly, through passion projects that teach her to create real value, through investment decisions that teach her how money grows, through family meetings that teach her the rules and the reasons behind them, she begins to understand what you once understood sitting in this same room at 7 years old. That the portraits on the wall aren't just family history. They are standard, a responsibility, a reminder that the decisions made in this room today will shape lives that haven't started yet. What this room taught you: 38 years of lessons, 9 systems, 1 unchanging truth. Wealth is not built by earning more. It is built by building structures that hold what you earn across time, across generations, across every crisis and opportunity that life delivers. The dynasty trust that holds assets without taxation between generations. The holding company that protects ownership from lawsuits and dilution. The family bank that ensures liquidity is always available without forced sales. The family constitution that creates rules before conflict makes them impossible. The council that removes emotion from decisions that are too important for emotion. The transfer restrictions that make the wrong move hard and the right move deliberate. The long-hold mindset that lets compounding work without interruption. The liquidity system that keeps every dollar working while keeping access always open. And the next generation reign not to spend wealth, but to grow it. Your family didn't build these systems because they were wealthy. They built these systems and then became wealthy. That distinction is everything. The room is still there. The portraits still watch. The oak table still stretches the length of the room. And somewhere, a 7-year-old is sitting in a chair that's slightly too big for them, listening to something they don't fully understand yet. Just like you once did. Just like every generation before you. The lesson always begins the same way. It's time you started learning. Which of these 9 systems does your family need most right now? That's where your legacy begins.